So our Parent University session tonight is about reluctant readers and some ways and some books to get your student reading again. I'm Kelly Day. That red glare. I'm our 612 ELA instructional coach. So I work with our middle and high school English language arts teachers. And hold on, I gotta just change my view on this. There we go. So during our session or so tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about high interest books, the case for graphic novels, how you can use book to movie adaptations to increase engagement, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about audiobooks. All of the books that I mention throughout the presentation tonight are available in one document, and the link to that document is on the last slide. As I go through this too, you'll see that the covers of the books in the presentation will take you a direct link to Amazon if you're interested. And then also I have most of the slides have 2 rows. The top row is typically geared towards 6 through 8, and the bottom row is typically geared towards 9 through 12. So at the end of this presentation, I'll put a link to this stuff so that way you have it as well. So when I'm thinking about reluctant readers, we're thinking about kids who are really resistant to picking up a book. And it's for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's, the books that they've picked up in the past have been too difficult for them. Or on the other side of it, maybe the books they've been reading in the past have been way too easy for them. And so they're not feeling challenged enough. Maybe they've just been picking up the wrong books. They're having a hard time finding a book that is on a topic that interests them. And so I'm going to address some great books that you can bring to your reluctant readers. As we go through this, though, I want to give you one huge tip. Think about books that are in a series and books that have that are written by authors with multiple books. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, if you can get your kid hooked on book 1 of a 5-book series or a 10-book series, then you've got, a whole bunch of books that you can feed to them after that. Same thing with books written by authors who have multiple books. Jason Reynolds is one of those really high interest authors for kids through middle and high school. And he has books written at all levels about all subject matters. And they're not series books. Not all of them are series books. So if you find 1 or 2 that you like by Jason Reynolds, chances are you're going to like them all. So we're going to start off with this idea of what makes a book high interest. There's usually a couple different things if we're thinking about not just younger readers, not just middle and high school readers, but just readers in general. We want books that are immediately relevant to ourselves. And we need to have books that work as a mirror. We need to be able to see ourselves in books. Books that have short chapters and or sections are especially appealing to readers that maybe struggle a little bit. Books that have a great hook and a great pace. For myself as a reader, if a book doesn't hook me in the first, let's say 30 pages or so, I'm not very likely to finish it. Or if a book really drags on and doesn't have a good pace, then it's one that I'm going to want to push aside. And then kind of that old adage of don't judge a book by its cover. Well, when you think about our middle school and our high school teens, they do. They want to pick up a book that has a great cover, or if it's a graphic novel, it needs to have great artwork because that's the first thing that they see. That's what's going to draw them in. And so fortunately, a lot of young adult authors and publishing houses have really realized this about our younger readers and are doing a lot to try and catch kids with the cover. So the first thing that I want you to really keep in mind is if your kid is resistant to read, what are they watching? What shows and movies interest them? So the bulk of my presentation here, I have thought about popular teen shows and movies and tried to find books that if your kid likes a particular show, they might be interested in this particular book. Okay. I am not going to talk about every book that I have listed here. Instead, I'm going to talk about 2 to 3 books per genre or per category here. And the one that I want to start off with is the supernatural. Um, Specifically, if your kid is into Stranger Things, which I think so many of our middle schoolers are, many of the books listed here would appeal to them. If they're into Vampire Diaries or The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, any of those kind of shows and movies, then our books here should appeal to them.
Yeah, should you be sharing your screen? Are you intending to share?
Is it not sharing?
It's not.
What happened there? Thank you for speaking up.
Certainly.
Let's see. How about now?
Still no. Oh, here it comes. There we go.
Oh,
Just takes a minute. Yep, we can see you now. Thanks.
oh, no problem. Thank you. I'm glad you spoke up. All right. Okay, so as I was saying, if you take a look at the slide here, the top row tends to be geared more towards like 6th through 8th grade readers, and then the bottom row tends to be geared towards our high school readers. And the reason I've separated them like that is some of our books that are geared towards high school readers. Can you guys make sure that you're muted? Thank you. The top row there tends to be maybe not as mature as the bottom row. So that's really the distinguishing factor, is that our bottom row books here are going to be a little bit more mature and handle some issues that might be a bit more applicable for our high school students. So one of the ones that I want to talk about, The Dark Deep. This is definitely for fans of stranger fiction. It's about a group of teens who discover this mysterious island with an abandoned boathouse that they turn into a clubhouse. But they soon discover that something ancient has awakened, and it's not just tapping into their wishes and dreams, but also their darkest, most terrible imaginings. It's super fast paced, and it's told through alternating points of view, which also helps keep that pace going. If you're looking for something for your high schooler, Dread Nation has been out for a couple years. It actually has a follow-up book to it. And this is kind of an alternate history combined with zombies. The main character is born 2 days before the dead begin to walk the battlefield of Gettysburg. And our main character goes through training in combat to fight zombies. But she also recognizes that maybe she wants a little bit of a better life for herself, but kind of has that struggle between helping her family as well as, bettering her own life. One of the other books that I have listed here is City of Bones. This is a series that's been out for a little bit of a time, but I really wanted to highlight it because Cassandra Clare, the author, she's got out about 24 books, and most of them are interrelated series. So her City of Bones series has, I want to say, 5 or 6 books in it. And then there's another series that ties into it that's got 5 or 6 books. So if you can get your kid hooked on City of Bones and Cassandra Clare, they've got 24 books that they can read. Kind of a spin-off of that genre is our action genre. So kids that are interested in movies and shows like The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Alex Rider just came out on Amazon Prime as a series. And so these are some books that might appeal to them. Among the Hidden is a series that has been out for a little while. This is pretty appealing across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We have a lot of students that just devour these books. And it takes place in the future where the population police are enforcing a law that limits a family to only 2 children. And it centers around a child, Luke, who's an illegal third children. He's always lived in hiding and in isolation. He's never had a friend. Until one day he sees a girl's face in the window of a house where he knows two other children already live. So he meets another shadow child like himself, and the series follows these two children. For our high school readers, Slay is a newer one. I just added this to my bookshelf, and it's probably the next one on my to-read list. The main character is a 17-year-old girl who's an honors student, a math tutor, and she's one of the only Black kids at Jefferson Academy. And then kind of her private life, she is also a huge gamer and video game designer. And she finds herself kind of at the center of some major conflict. Another teen in Kansas City is murdered over a dispute in this video gaming world. And so she just kind of finds herself at the center of all this. To me, this is one of the most unique storylines that I've heard from a young adult book as of late. Please stay muted. Thank you. Okay. Our next category that we have are comics. These are ones that, may have a bit of action to them as well, but not always. So these are books that I picked if your student is into anything Marvel or DC or the Umbrella Academy. These are books that might appeal to them there. A Blade So Black. This was a trilogy that I just stumbled across when I was looking for diverse and inclusive fantasy novels. Reviewers have described this book as a mix of Alice in Wonderland and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I thought was really kind of interesting to try and imagine how that might look. I Am Number 4 is a hugely popular series with our middle school and ninth graders. When I taught ninth grade, I frequently had students who would read the series. Hey, Carrie, what do you want to do?
Do you have the ability to mute everybody and leave them muted?
Yeah, I've muted everybody, but they keep unmuting.
Okay. I don't know who. Well, let's just keep going.
Okay.
There's somebody put in the chat, is Deep Dark Scary, that book?
I guess it kind of depends on your kid. Maybe a little bit, but it is geared towards middle school. It's not like if you look at the reviews, they're all recommended for like 6th, 7th grade. So it can't be, I haven't read it. I've heard great things about it from other teachers. And usually it's not in conjunction with it being too scary.
And one more chat before you continue is, do you have any recommendations for other books like Diary of a Wimpy Kid? But that's pretty young and you're not addressing.
No, but if your kid likes Diary of a Wimpy Kid because it's a graphic novel, I have definitely a bunch of recommendations for graphic novels.
That's it for the chat.
Thanks. Okay. So as I was saying, I Am Number 4 is a hugely popular series. It's got maybe 5 or 6 different books in the series, and the author recently came out with a spin-off series. And I was just talking briefly about those graphic novels. Primer is a newer graphic novel. The main character is a 13-year-old girl in the foster care system. Carrie, it's the same people. Can I just boot them?
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to.
Okay.
And they'll have to re-watch.
So as I was saying, Primer is another graphic novel. She's a 13-year-old girl in the foster care system, and she comes across some paints, like body paints, and when they touch her skin, they give her superpowers. So it's a graphic novel. It's gotten, great reviews going on right now, and it's fairly new as well. Okay, so if your kid is interested in shows like Riverdale or Pretty Little Liars or Nancy Drew, kind of those teen mystery shows, there are a ton of books out right now. This is kind of a genre that's starting to slowly have a moment, and it really comes back to a couple of authors that are kind of driving this moment. Um, the first book is One of Us is Lying. This is probably fine for your 8th grader as well, but definitely like 9th, 10th, and even going into 11th. The author, Karen McManus, um, creates kind of a breakfast club slew of characters that are really relatable, deal with really relatable issues like bullying and peer pressure and grades. And they all find themselves in detention together, and one character turns up dead. It's not scary, but these other characters find themselves at the center of this murder investigation. She has a couple other books out. There's one that's a follow-up to this, and then she has a few more teen mysteries out as well. And then for maybe our middle grades, if you have a student that has been reading Artemis Fowl, that author has a couple new books out with a spin-off series called The Fowl Twins. So those would be great to check out as well. And then one that a couple of our 6th grade teachers recommended was the novel Loot by Jude Watson. And this is book 1 of a 2-part series, and it involves young criminal masterminds who are brother and sister, but didn't know that either one existed until their father dies. And so he was a criminal mastermind, and they kind of pick up where he left off. Okay, so for a long time, I feel like sports books for teens were very much centered around football and basketball, and very much centered around male protagonists, which is great for our male readers that are interested in football and basketball. But we're starting to see more sports books come out that deal with um, boys, girls, a huge variety of sports, and kind of different angles with those stories. Um, Ghost, for instance, that is book 1 of 4 in a series written by Jason Reynolds. The way this series works is that you'd have to read Ghost first, and then the other 3 books, it doesn't matter what order you read them in, but Ghost sets the stage for the rest of the books. And they're about 4 kids from different backgrounds with different personalities, and when they come together, they're pretty explosive. But they're also chosen for a very elite middle school track team. So each book kind of looks through the eye of one of those characters. And then for our high school readers, Heroine has received a lot of attention lately. The main character is Mickey, who is a catcher on her high school softball team. And she finds herself sidelined when she's in a car accident. But she has to try and find a way to kind of keep a hold of her spot as the catcher for that team. And this is where the story collides a little bit with some very real, tough issues that deal with the opioid crisis that faces our world today. She finds herself taking pills to take away the pain, and it shows a pretty realistic view of just how dangerous that can be. As far as an author who has a ton of books out there that are sports related, Matt, I can never pronounce his last name right, Lupica, has a ton of books out on a huge variety of sports, and he's pretty popular at our middle levels. Okay, My last two categories here are pretty heavily drama. When we think about kind of our typical teenage TV shows like, go back to the 90s, Saved by the Bell, or Gossip Girl, or Outer Banks, which is a newer one that came out, back in the spring. If your child's interested in those, these are some books that might interest them. The first one is Posted, and I thought this was really interesting. This one just arrived in my mail the other day. It takes this, very common middle school occurrences like bullying and broken friendships and social media. And then it puts it against the backdrop of a recent cell phone ban at this middle school. And this group of kids decide to come up with a new way to communicate. And they leave Post-it notes or sticky notes for each other all over the school. And obviously that, a lot of the notes start off pretty well intentioned and then not so well intentioned. It's, pretty funny and pretty realistic to some of the stuff that our middle schoolers may encounter. With the Fire on High is a book by Elizabeth Acevedo, and this is hands down my absolutely favorite book of this year. In fact, it probably is in my top 5 for the last decade. Elizabeth Acevedo is just a master with words and telling a story that is relatable or insightful. So the main character in this is this girl, Imani. She's in her senior year of high school, but when she was a freshman, she became pregnant, and she's been raising her daughter with the help of her abuela. On the side, she is an aspiring chef. Food is her passion, and she is good at it. But she really struggles with this. She's so driven and so passionate about cooking and being a chef, but she feels held back because she's also a teen mom, and she's a teen mom that lives in poverty. So it definitely deals with some tough issues there, but the character, this main character, is just amazing. And Elizabeth Acevedo does a great job of storytelling. One more on this slide might be anything that deals with Simon versus the Homo sapiens agenda. Becky Albertalli's books are often referred to as the Simonverse books by her devoted readers. This was kind of the first one that started, not necessarily a series of books because you can read them out of order, but they all have related characters. And they are just kind of your typical cast of teenage characters who deal with love, loss, identity, acceptance, family problems, etc. Kind of taking our drama and upping it a notch. Some of these deal with some pretty tough topics. So if your student is interested in The Hate You Give, anything by Nicholas Sparks, 13 Reasons Why, a lot of these books might be appealing to them. The first one that I want to talk about, I just discovered it the other day and can't wait to read it. The main character, it's Ephron Divided. The main character is a middle schooler, and he's really worried about his parents because although he's American born, his parents are undocumented citizens. And his worst nightmare comes true one day when his mother doesn't return from work and she's deported back to Mexico. And so it deals with some very timely and relevant topics, but written at a level that is appropriate and appealing to our middle grade students. The Impossible Knife of Memory is a wonderful book by Lori Halls Anderson. I have not read a single book of hers that has not just wowed me. She's the author of Speak and Catalyst and Chains, and she's got several others. But The Impossible Knife of Memory tackles a topic that I haven't seen or read about as often in books. The main character is a teenager whose dad has been dealing with PTSD since he returned from Iraq, and they have a very hard time staying in one place. They decide to head back to his hometown where he grew up, and she's really hopeful that they can stay put and that she can stop with all of this transient drama that she's been dealing with. But her dad's dealing with a very real issue, this PTSD, and she finds, trying to not just be his daughter, but also to be his mother, to be his caretaker, and then, set that against kind of a typical high school experience. So it's definitely some tough issues there. Lori Halsey Anderson is a master at tackling issues like that, and very much so is John Green. Um, Anything like John Green, he creates great characters, great plots. He's got a great sense of humor, and he also tackles a lot of those tough issues as well, like the topics that come up in The Fault in Our Stars or Paper Towns, and Looking for Alaska. So those are just some, kind of books that I think are pretty high interest, that can appeal to a variety of readers. There are a ton more that I had on those slides. I just don't have the time to talk about them. But they came to me recommended either by books that I've read or by other teachers or research that I've seen and lists that they've come up on. I've mentioned graphic novels a little bit, so I want to talk a little bit more here. A lot of times people think that graphic novels don't count as real reading. They look at them as comic books and they consider comic books not to be real reading. That's false. Graphic novels are definitely reading. They are definitely books. They are full of text. They have plots and character development and perspectives. And many times they help some of our more vulnerable readers improve their reading comprehension, because they can be highly engaging and they provide that extra support by including pictures to go along with the words. A lot of times we have students that struggle to, envision the story in their head, and a graphic novel can help with that. So if your student is really interested in, they came from reading Captain Underpants in elementary school and you're trying to lift them up, and if it's the graphic novel that they like, that part of it, then I've got some ideas for them there. The other thing with graphic novels, and we'll see here, is that they cross genres, they cross age levels, they cross subject matter. There's a graphic novel out there for everyone. The first one that I want to talk about is New Kid. This is a book that, even though it's written about a seventh grader, it's actually a book that probably everybody of any age should read. The main character is really passionate about drawing and cartooning, and he really wants to go to this art school, but instead his parents enroll him in this very prestigious private school that's known for its academics, and he is one of the few kids of color in his entire grade. And he finds himself kind of straddling both worlds. If you have seen or read anything about The Hate U Give, the main character, Star, kind of goes through the same thing. He comes from Washington Heights, in this apartment, and he travels every day to this upscale academy, and he's kind of torn between those two worlds, and he's feeling like he doesn't really fit into either one. Jerry Craft, the author of New Kid, just came out with another one as well, called Class Act, and that's about another one of Jordan's friends at the academy. They Called Us Enemy has been out for a few years, and this was written by George Takei. Some of you may know him from Star Trek. But before he became a famous actor, he, as a child, was actually imprisoned within an American concentration camp during World War II. In 1942, FDR, at the order of FDR, every person of Japanese descent on the West Coast was put in a relocation center, an internment camp. And he was taken when he was 4 years old, and imprisoned there with his family. And so the novel kind of takes you into that life that he was living as a young child. It looks at his mother's hard choices, his father's faith in democracy, and the way those experiences kind of planted the seeds for the future that he is living now. The other ones that I have listed on here are just a huge variety of anything from sports with Dragon Hoops and Check Please, to Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, so some supernatural there. Legend is a pretty popular trilogy that's been out by Marie Lu, and she recently came out with the graphic novel version of it. And that's kind of along the veins of like a teen dystopia series. So there's a huge variety, all genres, all topics, all ages for graphic novels. So kind of the last area that I want to talk about here is this idea of how we can really capitalize on books that also have movie or TV shows out that are adaptations of that book. A lot of times, like our graphic novels, there's the criticism there. Well, if I'm going to watch the movie, why do I need to read the book? That's cheating. And in fact, it's not. It can definitely help our readers get that picture in their head, especially our readers that struggle a little bit to get that visual image. So sometimes watching the movie or watching a TV first can kind of help plant that seed. It can also help fill in the blanks for prior knowledge, unfamiliar vocabulary, difficult names, to help then the reader have a better understanding, a better takeaway from the books that they're reading. And to me, the best part of this is if you end up watching the book first and then watching the screen adaptation after, is hearing your students say, man, the book was better, and then telling you all the reasons why. When I used to teach the Kite Runner, we used to watch the movie version afterwards, and it's actually not very well done. But that was intentional because we wanted to kind of see how this great book lost its way once it was put into this movie, and maybe some of the choices that the director made weren't so great. And then hearing that critical conversation from students about really then why the book was so much better. So some oldies and some newbies. Wonder has been out for a while, but I have not ever heard a single person, kid or adult, who has not been definitely moved by the story of Wonder. If you're not familiar with it, the main character, August Pullman, starts 5th grade, and he has lived with a facial difference that's prevented him from going to a mainstream school. But in 5th grade, he decides that he's going to go to a mainstream school. He wants to be treated as an ordinary kid, but his classmates have a really hard time getting past his extraordinary face. The movie does a pretty good film adaptation as well. Everything is fairly new that came out. The main character is a girl who's literally allergic to the outside world. She has not left her house in 17 years. But she, and the only person that she, or the only people that she ever sees are her mom and her nurse. But one day a moving truck pulls in next door and she sees a boy about her age, and she's instantly interested in him. And she knows, like, I know I'm going to watch this kid from this window. I know I'm going to fall in love with this kid, and it's going to be a complete and utter disaster because of the life circumstance that she has. That's out as a movie as well as a book, and it's available on a couple different platforms. For some of our younger readers, How to Train Your Dragon is a series that has been out, a book series that's been out for a while, and it's been adapted into a couple different movies. And there's, I want to say a year or two ago, Netflix came out with a TV series for it. So if you have a student that is maybe in like the 6th grade range and is really interested in kind of dragons and magic and that kind of thing, then that would be a great series to check out as well. Oh, I forgot about audiobooks. Okay, this is my last point that I'm going to talk about. Again, another myth is that listening to an audiobook doesn't really count as reading a book. I disagree with that. In fact, listening to audiobooks has really helped me feel like I have been able to read a lot more this year because I've had more opportunity to maybe listen to an audiobook, whereas I don't always have the chance to pick up a book. So audiobooks definitely count, and they're definitely helpful. They are convenient. Find a way to get your kid to maybe listen to 10 minutes of an audiobook while they're cleaning their room or helping with the dishes. like movies, they can help beef up a reader's reading skills, because if they're following along in the book while listening to the audiobook, that can help enhance word recognition ability. It can also help them to maybe read more difficult books. And there's really no stigma there. Audiobooks are for everyone. And they're starting to kind of have their moment right now as well. And they can be fun, especially if you can find a really well done reading. I talked about With the Fire on High being my favorite book of the year, and I listened to that on audio. And I'm so glad that I did, because the author read it and she just had a beautiful voice that brought the story to life. So if you can find some audiobooks that have great narrators or great actors narrating, then it's definitely a benefit. The one caution on an audiobook is that they do take longer to get through. You might have a book that the audiobook says it takes maybe 8.5 hours to listen to. But if you were to sit down and read the book, it might take you more like 5 to 6 hours. They do take a little bit longer to get through. And I've got a couple that are just really great. All the ones that are listed on here, I actually pulled from a couple different recommended sites online that talk specifically about great audiobooks. And these were all ones that came up as having great audiobooks. The first one is Codename Verity, and that is a bit of historical fiction combined with an espionage thriller. A British spy plane crashes in Nazi-occupied France, and its pilot and passenger are best friends. And one of the girls has a chance at survival, and the others lost the game before it even began. That book has dual narrators, so both characters have a different voice, which I think is really helpful for some of our reluctant readers to be able to hear both of those narrators. For our high school listeners and readers, maybe On the Come Up. Angie Thomas is the author of The Hate U Give, which is widely recognized across our high school. And On the Come Up is her book that came out after that takes place in the same neighborhood, but about a completely new cast of characters. And this one I thought had a really interesting plot line as well. The main character is a 16-year-old girl who is dead set on becoming one of the greatest rappers of all times, which isn't something that you hear about very often. And so I was really hooked by that interesting topic, or that unique topic. She's also the daughter of this underground hip hop legend who died right before he hit it big. And so she feels a lot of pressure to live up to her dad. But she also then finds herself kind of at the center of this controversy about one of her songs, which goes viral. And it goes viral for all the wrong reasons. This is one of the books that when I first started listening to audiobooks, this was one of the first books that I listened to. And for me, it really helped to bring the story to life. I felt like I could hear the main character really living and telling her story. Okay. My last slide here, I have a variety of resources. Orion Township Public Library, they have a really great newer, I think he's been there for maybe 2 or 3 years, a newer teen librarian, which is super helpful. So if you're interested in chatting with somebody there, they are also great at being able to recommend and pair your kid up with a book. They even have a link on their website about what to read next. So if you liked this, then you might want to check that out. Epic Reads is one of my go-to websites. It's probably geared more towards our high school students, maybe dipping down into some of our more mature 8th graders a little bit. But they have a really great collection of book lists. So, and not just book lists by genre, but I mean, they had like 80 audiobooks that all teens should listen to, and all sorts of lists that are great. Book Riot is another website, and that's not necessarily geared towards our young readers. It's a all ages website, but they have a great section for children's books that includes middle grades, and they also have a great young adult section. Brightly is another great website that I use all the time, and this is appealing across K-12. They list a ton of books at all levels and all topics and subject matters. And then Riveted by Simon Teen is actually a website I came across back in the spring, and they offer free reads, free electronic ebooks for students to read. I want to say they release like 5 a month. And they can only be read during that month, and then they pull them off. But they're a really great resource as well. And then, as I mentioned, I'll push this link out, and that at the end of the slide here, there's a link that'll take you to a document that has all of these books listed in the presentation as well. Let me get out of here. Okay.
Got another question in the chat, Kel.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions about how to get kids started? I'm sure my son will love some of these if I can convince him to try.
So I think that modeling and setting aside some time to do some reading with your child is really important. Our kids that are readers, that are avid readers, there's usually somebody in their life that's also an avid reader. And so seeing you read, or take the time to sit down and say, I'm going to read for 20 minutes before I turn on the TV or I turn on a video game. I think that's really helpful. Reading alongside with your kid, or even picking up the same book as your kid and trying to read with them. And I guess, just kind of don't give up. It could be a lot of trial and error. My husband is not a reader, but it probably took him nearly 40 years to figure out that the reason he's not a reader is because he was reading the wrong books. And once he figured out that he likes kind of the sci-fi fantasy books, now he's more likely to pick up a book and read the whole thing, if it's that genre. So it could be a little trial and error as well.
And I think too, to tell kids it's okay to abandon a book you don't like.
Oh, 100%. Give it up.
If you don't stick with the book, if you don't love it. My daughter almost never read a whole book all the way through until she finally found a series in a genre that she liked, because genre is key. Yeah. So don't make them read a book all the way through if they're telling you they don't like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions for Kelly? Because we will post her PowerPoint presentation along with the recording on our Parent University page on the Lake Orion website. Within the next 48 hours, we'll get it posted. So you'll have all the links to those books that she kind of went through tonight. But if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and just ask her directly.
My Parent University session in January, I think it's on the 12th, is about building a culture of literacy at home. And so I am going to dig into more at that time too about some things that you can do in your home to kind of boost and foster some of these literacy skills and some interest in reading as well.
You can stop sharing, Cal, if you want.
Okay.
Any other questions for Kelly? Otherwise, we're going to end a little early tonight, which
I can just ask, you had mentioned you're going to post the presentation. Where will we find it?
Yeah, it's on the district website under the Teaching and Learning Department. There's a Parent University page. So if you go to departments and then Teaching and Learning, then there will be a Parent University page, and you'll find all of our Parent University recordings from this year there, along with presentations, the PowerPoints.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for going through it too. It was very, very, very helpful, very knowledgeable. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm also putting a link right now in the chat. I did take my PowerPoint and put it into a PDF. So that way all of those book covers are hyperlinks. So if you want that version of the presentation, it's in the chat right now. It's that tiny URL link that you can have as well.
Does the Orion Township Library have the audiobooks also?
Yes. I think they do. I think they do it through something called Overdrive or Libio, but they do audiobooks as well.
Okay. I know I've done their ebooks, but I hadn't done audio.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Kelly, and putting this together. We really appreciate it. And we know it's helpful for our parents to help these kids get them reading. Makes a big difference. The more readers, the more they read, it makes a bigger difference in their life
Oh, for sure.
from
For
reading.
sure.
Thank you so much for coming tonight. We appreciate you taking the time out of your evening. And we look forward. We have other parent university events. We have a K2 one tomorrow, and then we have some more in January coming up. So look for the flyers for those.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kel.